Wow, that was quick. I'm live. Welcome, fly tyers. Welcome to Fly Tying Monday. I hope that all of you are enjoying this summery weather in Vermont. It's actually been quite cool. It's been going down in the 40s at night, which we are delighted with. I actually started a fire in the fireplace yesterday morning, so the hot weather can stay away as long as possible. And I know that the West has finally gotten some water, but they've gotten too much water, and a lot of people are asking, well, what's the fishing going to be like in the Yellowstone area? And of course, nobody knows. The trout will probably be fine. They survived floods, even dramatic floods like this over hundreds of thousands of years, but the infrastructure may be tough where you were planning to stay or whatever. Hopefully some of this water will go in the ground and replenish the aquifers there. But it's been tough, and I know a lot of people who wanted to visit Yellowstone Park are probably not going to be able to right away. So tough situation. It's either feast or famine where water is concerned in the West these days, it seems like. So anyway, I'll wait a couple minutes till we get some more people in here. It looks like we have people from Wales and Poland and Jackson, Mississippi, and I know Ed's here from humid Central Florida. Ed's always here. And Indiana. William from Jackson, Michigan. William said he's glad to have me back. Well, I would say I'm glad to be back, but actually I was on Cape Cod for the past 10 days with my family and my new grandson and chasing striped bass. So I can't honestly say I'm glad to be back, but I'm happy to be here tying with you. I always enjoy these sessions, and I'm glad you're all here today. Thank you for coming in from all over the world, from Nevada to Argentina to South Africa. Wow, Texas. Well, we have some people here. Ben Shaftesbury is here. Yo from the 802, says Ben. Hi, Ben. Anyway, let's talk about this fly. So this is one of my own flies, one of my own patterns. And starting this year, Orvis started selling about a dozen of what they're calling my signature patterns. They're just patterns that I use, patterns that I've mostly modified traditional patterns to suit my needs, maybe to suit my ego, but not really, because I use standard patterns a lot, probably more than I use my own patterns. But there are some patterns that I use that I'm happy with, and have worked really well for me over the years, been proven. And this is one of them. So you can, if you don't tie, you can find these on the Orvis website. There's actually I think a selection of my own patterns. But anyway, this is as are many of my patterns. It's a quite simple fly. I don't, if I'm going fishing the next morning or the next day, I often don't have all the flies I need. So the patterns that I like are quick and dirty mostly. And I also believe that we can get too complicated on fly patterns, and that if we put too much stuff on a fly, too many features, the fish can find something that it doesn't like about the fly. Whereas if you're more of a minimalist, the fish just see an impression. And that's what this fly is. It's designed to create the impression of a caddisfly from underwater, not from the way we're looking at it in a vise, or not from overhead, the way you're looking at it in a fly shop, but the way the trout sees it from down below in a little bit from the side. And this fly came about because when I go to the Catskills Mountains, where there's some absolutely fantastic wild trout fishing and a lot of different bugs, I always take fly tying materials with me because it's a car trip for me. So I don't have to pack light. I can throw this big wooden box that I have with fly tying materials, and I can create patterns and come back the next morning or come back the next evening after fishing and say, I'd like to tweak that fly a little bit and tie some up and go out the next day. So I was staying at a friend's house. There was a gentleman named Rick Eck, the late Rick Eck. He passed away quite young, unfortunately, and he was just a wonderful human being. He owned a fly shop on the West Branch of the Delaware, and he was also an accountant. And Rick was just a super human being. He was always fun on the trout stream. He was always positive, and I just enjoyed his company. And he let me stay at his house, which was right on the Delaware, on the West Branch of Delaware, and it also was located smack dab in what has become my favorite stretch of the river. And I think it became my favorite stretch because I spent so much time there and I got to know the area. Anyway, there were some caddis flies that were hatching, and I wasn't having really good success. So I came back that evening and I said, okay, I know I want something low floating, but I want it to float well. I want it to, float for a long time without having to be redressed, but I want it to have some movement in it, and I want it to be simple. So I threw on some snowshoe rabbit fur and CDC and called it done. And the fly's been very successful for me. And I believe that low floating caddis flies are extremely important. I think that the Eck Caddis has been responsible for more refusals in fly fishing than any other fly, because the Eck Caddis, which is the most popular caddis imitation, imitates a caddis that's fluttering and skittering on the water. And trout prefer caddis flies that are either crippled or sunk or emerging, or flies that have come back after they laid their eggs and are just sitting in the surface film. These are easier bugs to capture. So I don't put any hackle on any of my favorite caddis patterns. One of them is the Eck Caddis. And the Eck Caddis has nothing to do with the Eck Caddis. It's just a coincidence, but because I named it after Rick Eck, E-C-K. Anyway, the flies only uses two materials, snowshoe rabbit and CDC. And I said, Ed said, what is the advantage of using snowshoe rabbit fur? Ed, one of the things is that I suspect that snowshoe rabbit fur has some hydrophobic properties, only because snowshoe rabbits have to walk on top of the snow, and they don't want their feet. They've evolved so that their feet don't get clumped up with wet snow, like felt soles do when we're wading in the wintertime. So I expected that the fur itself has some kind of hydrophobic properties. But even more important than that is it's just a nice material to work with. It's finer than deer hair, and it's easier to tie in, but it gives you a fairly wide profile with not using much material. And then putting CDC over the top, I think, just adds a little movement, because those CDC fibers, they're so fine and they're always moving, little air currents. If I go and blow on this fly, you can see those fibers move, and they're always moving. Jersey asks, it makes sense to talk with bug scientists because on the water we can simulate the bugs by flies. Yeah, it would make sense. Absolutely. There are a lot of fly fishers who are pretty serious bug scientists as well. Anyway, that's the reason for this fly, and it's quite simple fly. I don't know of a really good substitute for snowshoe rabbit's feet. You can buy these in fly shops. You probably have to do a web search. Orvis doesn't sell them, but you should be able to find them. One substitute would be some, rabbit fur, just from a zonker strip or something, or some very fine deer hair, but very sparse. But there isn't anything that's just like snowshoe rabbit that I'm familiar with. So anyway, Mark, what dubbing material would you suggest for black caddis for Bighorn River? I would just use the Orvis superfine dry fly, Spectra Blend dry fly dubbing in black. I like that. It's really nice for dry flies, and you can dub a nice tight small body with it. Are trout so keyed into a fly that they can see the movement of the CDC wing? I don't know, Roger. I think so. It makes sense to me, and it seems to work. So I don't question it, but I'm not sure. I don't have the answer. Ben asked, "What's that cool shirt you got on?" This is the Orvis Pro Sun hoodie. Yeah, it's a really super comfortable shirt in lots of different. It's cool here in Vermont, and it's comfortable, and I wear it in the tropics. So a little bit off the subject, but thank you for asking, Ben. Let's see. Okay, looks like I've answered all the questions here. And so, I'm tying this in a size 18 today. The reason is that I leave a light on. I leave my outside light on in the house because I can see what mayflies have hatched the day before. They come to the light and they sit there in the light, and they sit on the wall outside wall where I can easily look at them and photograph them. And I've been noticing a lot of very small caddis flies in the light. So I'm going to tie up some. I didn't have many size 18 Eck Caddises left. It's a very useful size. So I'm going to tie it on a small fly, on a small hook. And also in the description, I said I was using a tactical dry fly hook, but I'm going to use a size 18 big eye hook today because these caddis are coming off in my backyard river right as it gets dark, and I usually forget to take my flashlight down with me, and so it's a lot easier to thread a size 18 onto a 5X tippet when it's almost dark with those big eye hooks, which I really love because they have a bigger hook. So what is the starting kit for beginners to fly fisher from Orvis? Jersey, I would recommend probably the Encounter outfit, and maybe Julie or Phil or Tanner can post that on the. And I would say a 9'5" weight Encounter outfit would be the way to go. Thank you very much for putting the Encounter outfit up there. All right. So I'm kind of babbling on here because this fly isn't going to take very long. It's a pretty easy fly, but let's start tying. So I've got my little size 18 big eye hook here, and I'll pick it up and put it in my vise. There's what the finished fly is going to look like. A lot of focus. There we go. And I'm going to put this hook in my vise. This is a Renzetti Traveler vise with the midge jaws. And I think I said I was using brown thread for this fly. You can use any color thread you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm using yellow 12-0 because I had yellow 12-0 in my bobbin. And so, as I said, it doesn't really matter, so that'll work. So I'm going to start my thread about a third of the way back, probably. Doesn't really matter where you start your thread on this fly. And I'll go back to the bend of the hook, right where the bend starts to curve down. Maybe take one more turn. All right. Now I'm going to take a well-used snowshoe rabbit's foot, and I'm going to come into the heel part of it where there's some heavier fur, and I'm just gonna cut some of this fur off. And it has white guard hairs, and I don't want to remove all the white guard hairs, but I'm going to pluck a bunch of them out of there. I like to keep a couple in there because it gives the fly a little bit of a kind of a hare's ear look. And then I'm just going to mix that with my fingers so that it's all mixed up. You could put this in a blender if you wanted to, but I'm not going to bother. And I'm going to take another bunch because that's a pretty small bunch. You can use any dubbing you want for this. If you really care about color, you could match the body of the caddisflies that you see. I never know what color the caddisflies are going to be. So honestly, I just tie this fly in gray, and gray seems to be close enough. I'm not a big believer in matching color exactly. Gray seems to be close enough. So there's my dubbing, and I also had some prepared here in a little container. I like these little containers that beads come in, because you can put your dubbing in there and it doesn't blow all over the table. If I can get it open, I'll put that in with the other dubbing that I made before. And then I'm going to go over to the fly. My switcher isn't where, oh yeah, it is. Here we go. Sorry about that. I thought my switcher wasn't working. And I'm going to dub just a little bit of this. I got a size 18 here, and I don't need much, and you won't be able to see me dubbing this, but I'm just going to barely dirty the thread. Again, this is a size 18, so I don't need much dubbing on here. Hard to get in here with the camera to dub. All right. So I've got some dubbed tightly on there. You don't need any wax with this stuff. You can use wax if you want, but I find that it dubs just fine without wax. Take a few turns with that bare thread, and then when your dubbing starts, you can work it forward. I don't put much taper on this fly either. Caddis flies don't have much of a taper to them. And then I like to go all the way to the eye just to cover that shank with thread so that I can secure my rabbit's foot. Any questions so far, Julia?
Yeah, we actually just got one. Oh, here, let me make you bigger. Hi, everybody. Matt just asked if you can fish a dropper off the caddis, or if you ever do.
Not off this one. When I see fish taking, a specific insect, I don't fish a dropper off my dry fly. I think that it impairs my accuracy, and the plop of the nymph sometimes might spook the fish. And this fly does not float well enough to suspend a nymph. You could fish this with a soft hackle as a dropper or an unweighted nymph, but this is not going to hold. This is not going to hold a nymph. So it's not a. If I were going to do something like that, then I would fish a foam-bodied caddis fly or an elk hair caddis or something else. But this won't hold a dropper up. Nope. Okay. Good question.
That's the only question that's come through.
Okay. All right. So now I'm gonna get some wing material, and for the wing, I come up to the toe of the rabbit's foot. And oh, by the way, sometimes rabbits' feet are easier to work with if you break them, and you got to be careful because those toenails are sharp, and sometimes you need a razor blade or a cutter or something. But you can see I'm kind of hacking this thing apart. But sometimes it's hard to get into the hair, the exact hair you want. So just cut or tear that rabbit's foot. And then it's easier to get into, find the hair of the right, because the hair is going to be really fine up toward the tip, better for size 18s. And then it's a little bit heavier down here towards the heel, and it's better for a little bit bigger flies. Adjust that light a little bit. So I'm going to come up here to the toe where it's finer and grab a small bunch of this and cut it off. And then remove the underfur. And then I like to take and just pull out the really long fibers and any unruly ones, shorter ones that are down at the base, until I get a nice kind of uniform bunch. So I'm just plucking some of those bigger fibers out of there. So now I've got a bunch of rabbit's foot hair, and I'm going to place that right where I want it, which is just a little bit longer than the hook shank. Let me zoom out here. Just a little bit longer than the body. Sorry, not the hook. Well, the hook shank or the body.
We have a couple questions, Tom.
Okay.
One very important. Mike Fox is asking about my earrings. I'll put a link in the chat. It's actually one of my friends and former coworkers from Chicago. She has her own jewelry design business, so thanks for noticing. And secondly, Bala's asking, did you say that these flies can be used in the Bighorn River in Wyoming during the summers?
These flies can be used any place at Caddis hatch, which is about any trout stream in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Jersey's asking, what is the most natural material after rabbit feet? Like, what else could you use besides rabbit feet?
You could use
Like some. Oh, and then John chimed in if you could use asking if you use squirrel.
You could try using squirrel.
Okay.
You could try using some shorter hairs from squirrel. It won't have the water repellent properties, and the rabbit's foot is very translucent, so it's very natural looking, kind of sparkles. There's nothing quite like rabbit's foot hair, though. And as you can see, unlike deer hair or those other hairs, there's no bulk. When I tie this in, I'm not going to create a bulky head at all. It compresses really well. If I tried to do this with deer hair, I'd end up with a lot more bulk there. So that's why I like it. I can tie small flies with it fairly easily. And I'm just going to clip the ends off here. And then make sure that you really secure those. Make sure that your wing is, kind of centered on the hook. And come forward and put a lot of pressure on that and bind it down so it doesn't come out. And then go back to the initial tie-in point. Whoops. Okay.
And
there's
Thomas just commented that our YouTube link isn't streaming, and I think they're right. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, so we'll let you know. I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I set this up on YouTube. It should
be. It looks like it's all ready to roll. You don't worry about it. You can keep tying. I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. But just
okay, yeah,
you are correct, Thomas.
Yeah. I don't know why it's not streaming on YouTube. Okay. So now I'm going to get some CDC for the wing. And you can either use 1 or 2 feathers. And I'm just going to, I think the best way to deal with CDC when selecting feathers is just dump some out on the table. And this is a bag from ducks that I shot, so that's all sorts of varying degrees of quality. And I like a fairly small, fluffy CDC feather, and you only need 1 on you only need 1 on this. I'm trying to focus that. Anyway, there's the CDC feather. Maybe it's better if I show it on black. Yeah, that shows up better. And I'm going to take this CDC feather and start it really super long. Like twice what I want it to be in the end. And I'm going to take 2 loose wraps over that CDC. You can see it's at this point, it's really long. But I want it to be just a hair longer than that that underwing of snowshoe rabbit. And then what I do is I just pull this up gently until it gets to the point. And this seems to make it behave better by tying it in and then pulling it. So it's just a little bit longer than the rabbit's foot, or equal in length to the rabbit's foot. And once I've got that where I want it, then I'll take a couple of really tight turns, 2 or 3 tight turns to secure it. And clip it off. Like so. And now all we need to take a little more of that underfur and dub a head. and I don't need much. Just going to grab just a pinch, tiny pinch of that dubbing and roll it on the hook tightly in one direction only. And then I'm going to wrap back to the wing and then start to come forward. And it's done. Finish that. Oops.
Okay, we have a couple questions.
Okay. Fire away.
Ed's asking if you use floatant with this fly.
I do, but I use the dry floatant. I don't use paste floatant with it because the paste floatant would. What I do with any fly with CDC is I don't put any floatant on it initially, and then when it starts to sink or not become visible, then I'll use desiccant powder or dust or one of those dry floatants. And here's a tip for you when tying small flies. Get this focused. This water-based head cement is, I'm going to shake it up a little bit. Water-based head cement is really, really less viscous than the other head cements. And it's much easier to finish the head with this water-based head cement than it is with a thicker Sally Hansen's or whatever. I'm just going to put a little drop on my dubbing needle, and I'm having trouble getting in here with the camera. Just put just a touch of that on the thread wraps. Maybe I'll put a little bit more on there. And because it's so thin, I always like to make sure the eye is clear with my dubbing needle. Because you don't want to go to all the trouble of using that big eye hook and then finding out that you put some head cement in the eye and you can't thread it after dark or into near darkness. So that is the Eck Caddis. And again, it's it's what you might call a guide fly. It's a really simple, quick to tie, and it works. It's been a very successful fly for me. Is your eyesight good enough to see a low floating caddis like that? Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, I can't see many flies in near darkness. I have to, like most people, I think, you have to just estimate where your fly is and set the hook when you think there's a rise in the general vicinity. Gently set the hook. Yeah, it's going to be tough to see. It's going to be tough to see. But nearly any fly is going to be tough to see. I was fishing a parachute last night with an upright wing that was a very pale tan, and I still couldn't even see that. So it really didn't matter. Don't worry about not seeing your fly. You're not going to see your dry fly all the time, people. You're just not going to. A rainy day in a riffle or just before dark, you're not going to be able to see that fly, and that's why casting accuracy it is so important, because if you have an idea where your fly is landed and you trust your rod and your line and your leader to put that fly where you think you put it, you're going to be able to, and look at the speed of the current. You're going to know when your fly is over that rising fish, and if a fish rises, gently set the hook. And you're not going to be able to see it. And I don't worry about spooking trout in this particular pool that I've been fishing in my backyard, because I have a beaver who has decided that it's his pool, and he circumnavigated that pool about 6 times last night, and kept popping his head up and looking at me and slapping his tail to the point where there were waves all over the pool. And the trout apparently have gotten used to this beaver. It did not care a hoot what he was doing. They were rising right next to him. They were rising after he splashed his tail. So I'm kind of thanking the beaver, because these fish aren't very spooky because they're used to the beaver making a lot of commotion in there. So anyway, the beaver and I have this standoff every night. It's kind of fun to watch him get mad at me. But anyway. Okay, let's see. Yep, another clean and easy tie. Yeah, it's clean and it's easy. It's quick and dirty, Roger. Yep, hairline, nature spirit, have snowshoe, rabbit. Those are both good suppliers. Hairline you can't, Alessandro, hairline you can't buy from directly. They're a wholesaler, but fly shops that carry hairline can get snowshoe rabbit. I imagine that Fly Fish Food has snowshoe rabbit. But just do a web search on it, and you'll find some snowshoe rabbit. It's good stuff. Jersey beginning fly fishing rod from Orvis is the Orvis Encounter. I think we already posted that. That's a great rod. The step up to that from that would be a Clearwater rod, which carries the 25-year guarantee and is a little bit nicer rod. But the Encounter rod is perfectly fine fly fishing rod. I use the Encounter rods myself sometimes. No, I have never fished the corn-fed caddis. Sorry, Nicholas. Can you use an indicator with this pattern? I wouldn't, Mike. You're gonna indicators make a big splash, and the places I fish anyway, when the fish are rising, you don't want to plop an indicator down in front of them. So I wouldn't. I would just estimate where it is and set the hook gently when you see a fish rise. That's the way to do it. What are the best dry flies in your opinion? Oh boy, Colin. That's going to vary with the region. In general, you're going to want either really small flies or really big flies, depending on whether you have some grasshoppers or larger terrestrials in your waters. Most of the mayflies and caddisflies are going to be small. That's why I'm tying this in a size 18. As we get into summer, the flies get smaller. There are some big mayflies and caddisflies that hatch during the summer, but most of them are going to be smaller. Andy, I'm probably going to miss the American shad because they're running right now, and I don't think I'm going to get over to the Connecticut River in time for that. Does tippet color matter? I don't think so, Roger. And Irma. I guess it's Irma that asked the question. I don't think so, Irma. I don't think it matters. I think the fish can see clear 8X tippet, and so the color of the tippet probably is not a big factor. They just ignore it. They see a lot of stuff floating in the water, and they just ignore the tippet as long as your fly isn't dragging. That's the most important. Do you replace tippet every year? Steve, I never replace fluorocarbon because it doesn't break down. And I used to replace my nylon every year because nylon does eventually break down, but I keep it in a dark room in the off season. And I think I can get 2 years out of tippet. I wouldn't trust it past 2 or 3 years. Even if you keep it in a dark room, I think that nylon just eventually breaks down. And so, but I wouldn't worry about tippet bigger than say 4X, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Probably you want to replace after a few years, but the bigger tippets probably doesn't matter. They don't lose as much strength. And again, fluorocarbon, you never have. I'm fishing some 20-year-old fluorocarbon in salt water, and I don't worry about it. I have a slight benign hand tremor. Do you have any advice for tying knots? Leiden, what I would do is make sure that you allow yourself extra tippet material and make sure that you leave big loops open when you're tying, whether you're tying a clinch knot or a blood knot or whatever. Use a lot of tippet material. You're going to lose a little bit. So, you know, when you measure tippet off the spool, you want to add a little bit, but just leave big loops, and that will make it, that's always going to make it easier to tie knots rather than trying to scrimp on, another 1/4 inch of tippet material. Use up a little bit more tippet material, but use big loops when you tie your knots. And of course, good close-up glasses. If you have trouble seeing up close, good close-up glasses and plenty of light. If you're having trouble, it's getting dark, make sure you carry a little headlamp or something. No, I haven't fly fished in Scotland. Sorry, Steve. I've fished in the UK, but not in Scotland. Jersey, I don't know when I'm going to fish in Poland. I'd like to someday, but there's a lot of places that I haven't been. What are your thoughts around tippet rings? Tronda, I don't use tippet rings, but that often. But I do think they're a good thing. I don't have any trouble tying knots, so I'll use them. I use them sometimes. I use them on sinking lines, but I don't. They work and they're fine. I think they're particularly if you're insecure with your knot tying or not too handy with your knot tying. Tippet rings work because all you need to know is the clinch knot. What can you use for pig hair? John, about the only thing I think used for pig hair that I've seen, because it's so coarse and bristly, would be to wind it as a body like you would moose mane. And you may want to soak it first. I've never used pig hair, but I've seen pig hair. And I think that probably a body on a nymph or something, pig hair would work for that. Tippet ring might help your tremor issue, Leiden, depending on which knot you're having trouble with. Won't help you with your blood knot, but you don't really need a blood knot if you put a tippet ring on the end of your leader and do that. Yeah, that might help. Yep. Any answer when the delayed fly from the online tying lessons will be? I don't think we're going to do that, Chernobyl, Aunt Danny. It's past time. We thought it was not a cool fly to tie at the way things were going on in the world, and it's a little bit past the time. So I don't think we're going to tie it, but it is in my book, Orvis Fly Tying Guide, so you can find it there, or you can find some online instructions for the Chernobyl ant. There's plenty of lessons out there on it. So. John, I think you're is it heavyweight. What are you referring to? Heavyweight or lightweight will float. I've never used it. What was John asking about? Tippet rings or pig hair? Oh, I don't think it's going to float very well, John. I think you want to use it for nymph bodies. Yeah, when I talk about replacing tippet, I'm talking about the whole spool. I know it's wasteful. If kind of, it's best to plan for how much tippet you're going to use in a season so that you don't have to throw any out in a couple of years. Ed wants some more warm water flies. Yeah, good idea, Ed. We're getting into summer. Good idea. Yep, the Orvis knot's a great one, Leiden. You say you're having trouble with, I saw you say you're having trouble with triple surgeons. And again, I would allow yourself plenty of tippet material, so create a big loop with that triple surgeons. And also, another trick I find is to wet the tippet when you tie the triple surgeons. That will keep those two strands together so that when you're going around the loop twice, they don't kind of separate and go all over the place. So I just wet my line when I'm tying triple surgeons, and that keeps the two strands, they kind of stick together when they're wet. Wondering if you had any recommendations for dry flies to catch brook trout and salmon on. No, Colin. It's gonna be based on what they're eating. You try to match that as closely as you can. Find out what flies are locally popular. No, Abe, I've never fished in the Sierras. Squirrel probably won't work that well, Mike, but you can try it. Squirrel tail tends to absorb water pretty quickly. It's good for streamers, not so good for dry flies. Gabe, we already talked about the Yellowstone flood. Nobody knows. Nobody's going to know till the water goes down. But the trout should be fine. They can handle floods pretty well. They just tuck down on the bottom of the river and ride it out. The velocity at the bottom of the river is generally very slow. Even during floods, it's quite slow because of all the friction. So they just find places to tuck in deeper, slower water and ride it out. Congratulations, Teacher Strong, on your first brown trout after taking the Orvis fly fishing course. Well, that's great. That's a big deal, catching your first brown trout on a fly. Congratulations. You've been fishing? Mystic Mac 413, I fish almost every day, whether I'm on vacation or home. I'm an addict. All right, everyone. Well, looks like we're kind of getting off topic, but it was a short fly today, so I don't mind answering these questions. If anybody has any last-minute questions before we go, next week we're tying another one of my patterns. It's a caddis pupa pattern, And it was actually responsible for the biggest trout I ever caught on the bat and kill this past spring. And so it's a proven fly. It's a little more difficult. This one's pretty tricky. This is it's going to be a black diamond fly tying. I mean, it's not horribly hard. It's not like tying a full dress salmon fly, but it's a little bit trickier, a little bit fussier. So that will be more of a challenge. So if there are no further questions, and I don't see any, got my dad his first 5-weight rod for Father's Day. How can I get him casting? Brent, you know your dad better than me. You're going to have to figure that out yourself. Yeah, I don't have any suggestions for you. There, lots of strategies with dads, but they're going to vary depending on the dad's personality. I could never get my father to use a fly rod, so I sympathize with you. Yeah, my father just didn't want to do it. He loved to fish. He loved to fish with worms, but my dad never could pick up a fly rod. All right, everyone. Well, I want to thank you for coming today. Those were some great questions. Good luck going out and finding some of that rabbit's foot. I think you will like it. I use rabbit's foot a lot. It's a very easy material to work with, and it's quite effective. And again, it doesn't create a lot of bulk, so it's great for smaller flies. All right, everyone. Have a great week, and I will see you next week when we'll tie that caddis pupa pattern.